And anybody who knows my music knows that the music was all about a healing journey.
Yes.
It still is. It
Yes.
all was.
I'm responsible for me, as in responsible for the energy I bring to the world. And I didn't want to keep leaking my pain onto other people.
Remember India Arie? Now we finally know her tragic story. What India Arie just revealed about decades of industry blacklisting and systematic racism changes everything we thought we knew about the soul singer's tragic story.
I felt like I was being disrespected. But I didn't think, and there's a long conversation about that, about not being heard in the industry, not being respected in the industry for not just me, a lot of people, especially artists of color, especially women of color.
The Grammy winner who preached self-love was secretly battling trauma that destroyed her career and nearly ended her life.
I felt like my tank was empty. I couldn't go any further. I couldn't.
These shocking revelations expose the dark truth behind one of music's most inspiring voices and why she disappeared from the spotlight. So, let's get into it. India Arie built her career on messages of self-love and empowerment. But behind the inspiring anthems lay a devastating secret that had haunted her since childhood. For over 2 decades, the Grammy-winning artist carried the weight of inflicted by the very person who should have protected her most, her father, former NBA player Ralph Derek Simpson. The trauma began when India was just a young child, too small to understand what was happening to her. Her father, who had played professional basketball in the ABA and NBA during the 1970s, used his position of power and trust to systematically his daughter. The horror continued for years, creating psychological wounds that would shape every aspect of India's life and career. But the abuse wasn't limited to India alone. Her mother, Joyce Simpson, also suffered at Ralph's hands. Joyce later revealed that her husband had abused her, creating a household where violence and were hidden behind closed doors. The family lived in a nightmare of secrecy, with Joyce staying silent to protect her children and maintain the facade of a normal family. The devastating impact of this childhood trauma would follow India throughout her life. While she sang about loving yourself and finding inner strength, she was privately battling the effects of years of The messages in her music weren't just inspirational lyrics. They were desperate attempts at healing. Prayers for the self-love that had been stolen from her as a child. Ralph Simpson, the man who should have been India's protector and role model, instead became the source of her deepest pain. His professional success as an athlete provided a perfect cover for his crimes, allowing him to maintain a public image while terrorizing his family in private. The duality would become a pattern that India would recognize later in the music industry. Public success masking private horrors. In 2002, India Arie stood on the brink of superstardom. Her debut album, Acoustic Soul, had been a critical and commercial success, earning her an unprecedented 7 Grammy nominations, including Album of the Year, Record of the Year, Song of the Year, and Best New Artist.
This is in remembrance of
She was the second most nominated artist that night, trailing only U2. And the music world expected her to dominate the ceremony. But what should have been India's triumphant moment became one of the most devastating snubs in Grammy history. As category after category was announced, India watched helplessly as Alicia Keys swept 5 of the 7 awards she had been nominated for. By the end of the night, India had lost every single nomination. A complete shutout that stunned the music industry.
albums, and I got nominated for 7 Grammys.
Whoa.
And so the show came and I lost all of them.
The public humiliation was crushing. Media outlets immediately dubbed it the worst snub in Grammy history, and the phrase "getting India Aried" entered hip-hop vernacular as slang for being completely shut out at award shows. What should have been validation of her artistic vision instead became a symbol of failure and rejection. The Grammy snub triggered something deeper in India's psyche. Already carrying the trauma of childhood, the public rejection felt like confirmation of her worst fears about herself. In a later interview with Oprah, she admitted that she immediately began questioning whether she deserved success, whether she was built for that level of recognition.
I felt like my tank was empty. I couldn't go any further. I couldn't.
The psychological impact was severe. India found herself paralyzed by fear, afraid of both failing and succeeding. The industry that had initially embraced her message of self-love had publicly rejected her, sending a clear signal that perhaps her natural hair, her spiritual lyrics, and her refusal to herself weren't what they wanted after all. The timing couldn't have been worse. India was still processing her childhood trauma while trying to navigate the brutal politics of the music industry. The Grammy snub became another layer of this time from an industry that claimed to celebrate artistry, but seemed more interested in maintaining certain standards of what a successful female artist should look and sound like. The Grammy snub was just the beginning of India Arie's battles with an industry she would later describe as racist and deceitful. Behind the scenes, record executives and industry gatekeepers were systematically working to diminish her influence and limit her success, because she refused to conform to their expectations of what a black female artist should be. India's natural hair, modest clothing, and spiritual messaging made her a threat to the industry's preferred image of hyper black women. While artists who fit the mold received massive promotional budgets and radio play, India found herself fighting for basic support from her own label. The same executives who had initially praised her authenticity now saw it as a liability. The discrimination was subtle but pervasive. Radio stations that had once embraced her music suddenly found reasons not to play her new releases. Concert venues that should have been easy bookings became mysteriously unavailable. Media outlets that had celebrated her debut began treating her as a has-been, rather than an artist with multiple platinum albums. But the industry's attacks went beyond simple neglect. India later revealed that she was constantly pressured to change her image, to straighten her hair, to wear more revealing clothing, to sing about instead of spirituality. When she refused, she found herself increasingly marginalized, pushed to the sidelines of an industry she had helped revolutionize. The psychological warfare was devastating. An industry that should have been celebrating her unique voice and positive messaging instead made her feel like she wasn't beautiful, as she later revealed. The same executives who profited from her music were simultaneously working to undermine her confidence and artistic vision.
I felt like I was being disrespected, but I didn't think, and there's a long conversation about that, about not being heard in the industry, not being respected in the industry for not just me, a lot of people, especially artists of color, especially women of color.
The impact extended beyond just her career. India found herself questioning everything about her appearance and worth, despite having built her reputation on encouraging others to love themselves exactly as they were. The industry had weaponized her own insecurities, turning her message of self-acceptance into a source of doubt and pain. By the mid-2000s, India Arie was trapped in a vicious cycle. The industry's systematic discrimination had taken its toll, both professionally and personally. Albums that should have been massive successes were underperformed, not due to lack of quality, but because of limited industry support. Concert tours were scaled back, promotional opportunities disappeared, and media coverage became increasingly rare. The breaking point came when India realized she was no longer making music for herself, but trying desperately to satisfy an industry that would never fully accept her. The artist who had once confidently declared, "I am not my hair," found herself second-guessing every creative decision, every outfit choice, every public appearance. In 2009, India made a shocking decision that stunned her remaining fans. She announced her retirement from the music industry. At just 34 years old, with multiple Grammy wins and platinum albums to her name, she walked away from everything she had worked for.
I want to continue to be creative and to do my art, but also I don't want to have that single-minded focus on my music anymore.
The official reason was burnout, but the reality was much darker. India later revealed that she had reached a point where she no longer recognized herself. The combination of childhood trauma, industry racism, and constant pressure to conform had broken something fundamental inside her. She was exhausted from fighting battles on multiple fronts, healing from her father's while simultaneously battling an industry that seemed determined to destroy her spirit. The retirement wasn't just from performing, it was a complete withdrawal from public life. India stopped giving interviews, stopped attending industry events, and largely disappeared from social media.
Coming to the music industry, the point is that you do as much as you can to get as much attention as you can.
Right.
You want everybody to see you. You want them to know about your album and your single. You know, I got this out. That's what we do. We are promoting our wares.
Yeah.
I have been doing that for 20 straight years.
For someone who had been a constant presence in the cultural conversation, the silence was deafening. But the disappearance wasn't peaceful. India later described this period as one of the darkest in her life, where she questioned not just her career choices, but her will to continue living. The woman who had inspired millions with songs about inner strength was privately battling thoughts of wondering if the world would be better off without her voice. When India Arie returned to music after her hiatus, she found an industry that had become even more hostile to artists like her. The rise of streaming platforms had created new forms of exploitation, and India refused to stay silent about what she saw as systematic theft from Black artists. In 2022, India made headlines when she pulled her music from Spotify in protest of Joe Rogan's racist language and the platform's massive investment in his podcast.
No white people. Says, okay, take me to this one. And the guy goes, okay. I goes, is that in a good neighborhood? He's like, oh, yeah. Guy barely speaks English. He takes us there. We get out, and we're giggling. Oh, we're going to see Planet of the Apes. We walk into Planet of the Apes. We walked into Africa, dude.
But her fight wasn't really with Rogan. It was with a system that valued controversial white voices over groundbreaking Black artists, paying Rogan $100 million while offering pennies per stream to the artists who created the music that drove the platform's success. The decision to remove her music was deeply personal for India. She had watched for years as streaming platforms profited from Black music while offering inadequate compensation to Black artists. When Spotify chose to stand behind Rogan despite his history of racist comments, it represented everything India had been fighting against for 2 decades.
Spotify is built on the back of the music streaming. So they take this money that's built from streaming and they pay this guy $100 million, but they pay us 0.003% of a penny. Just take me off. I don't want to generate money that pays this.
The industry's response was swift and vicious. Instead of supporting her principled stand, many in the music business labeled her as difficult, ungrateful, and attention-seeking. Radio stations that had already limited her airplay found new reasons to ignore her completely. Streaming playlists that should have featured her music suddenly had no space for her songs. But India was no longer the vulnerable young artist who had been crushed by the Grammy snub. Years of therapy and spiritual work had given her the strength to speak truth to power, even when it cost her professionally. She began posting raw, honest reflections about the industry's treatment of Black women, calling out the racist and deceitful practices she had witnessed. The retaliation was predictable, but still painful. Industry executives who had once courted her now spread rumors about her being difficult to work with, Opportunities that should have been automatic for an artist of her caliber mysteriously evaporated. The message was clear. Speak out against the system, and the system will destroy you. On Father's Day 2025, India Arie made the most difficult decision of her life. After decades of silence, she finally spoke publicly about the she had suffered at the hands of her father. The revelation came through a heartbreaking Instagram post that directed followers to an audio recording of her mother, Joyce, describing years. The decision to go public wasn't easy. India had spent her entire adult life in therapy, trying to heal from the trauma while maintaining her career and public image. But watching her father continue to manipulate family members and request money from her despite his history finally pushed her to break the silence. Joyce's audio recording was devastating in its raw honesty.
You, Ralph Simpson, gave her a lot to heal from. With God therapy, life therapy, music therapy, journaling, this helped her make it through the crazy.
The courage it took for both women to speak these truths publicly was immense. The revelation recontextualized everything about India's career and public struggles. Her songs about self-love and healing weren't just inspirational anthems. They were autobiographical testimonies from a survivor of severe childhood trauma. Her battles with the music industry took on new meaning when viewed through the lens of someone who had been fighting for her dignity and worth since childhood. Ralph Simpson's response to the revelations was typically manipulative. Rather than taking responsibility for his actions, he reportedly continued trying to extract money from his children, while painting himself as the victim. His gambling addiction had reportedly consumed money intended for his son's car, and he was relying on financial support from the very children he had abused.
Your son, Jawan Simpson, worked all summer after college, bussing tables, cutting grass, anything he could do to make money to purchase his car that summer. He sent the money to you to save for him. You gambled all of his money away.
The family's decision to speak out was about more than just their own healing. It was about breaking a cycle of trauma that had poisoned their lives for decades. As Joyce said in her recording, the family curse stops here. After years of protecting they finally chose to protect themselves and future generations. In 2012, India Arie faced a devastating betrayal from someone she had trusted with her career and financial future. Her longtime manager, Noreen Nali, filed a lawsuit against her, claiming unpaid commissions and painting a picture of an artist who had become impossible to work with. The legal documents revealed shocking allegations about India's behavior during their professional relationship. According to Nali's lawsuit, India had become increasingly erratic and difficult to manage. The court filings claimed that India would cancel gigs at the last minute, turn down lucrative performance opportunities without explanation, and disappear for weeks at a time, making herself completely unavailable to her management team. These cancellations allegedly cost both women significant income and damaged India's reputation in the industry. The lawsuit painted India as an artist who was sabotaging her own career through unpredictable behavior and poor decision-making. Nali claimed that despite her best efforts to secure opportunities and manage India's career, the singer had become increasingly resistant to professional advice and unwilling to fulfill her contractual obligations. But India saw the situation completely differently. She filed a countersuit, alleging that Nali had overcharged her for management services and failed to protect her interests during crucial negotiations. India claimed that her former manager had not only taken excessive commissions, but had also failed to shield her from the industry's systematic discrimination and exploitation. The legal battle became particularly ugly when details emerged about India's mental state during their working relationship. Court documents suggested that India's unpredictable behavior was linked to her ongoing struggles with trauma and depression, issues that Nolly allegedly knew about but failed to accommodate or address professionally. The lawsuit revealed the financial strain India was under, despite her success. The legal fees alone were crushing for an artist already struggling with reduced income due to industry blacklisting. The woman who had once commanded six-figure performance fees found herself fighting over relatively small amounts of money, highlighting just how far her career had fallen from its peak. After her 2009 retirement, India Arie's absence from the music industry created a void that other artists quickly filled. The neo-soul movement she had helped pioneer continued without her, with newer artists like HER, Solange, and SZA carrying forward similar messages of Black empowerment and self-love. But when India attempted her comeback in 2013 with the album Songversation, she discovered that the industry had moved on without her.
I am not the things my family did. I am not the voices in.
The comeback album was deeply personal, reflecting 4 years of intensive therapy and spiritual work. Songs like 6th Avenue and Cocoa Butter showcased a more mature, introspective India, who had processed much of her trauma and found new strength in her voice. Critics praised the album as some of her best work, calling it chicken soup for the soul, and celebrating her growth as both an artist and a person. But critical acclaim didn't translate to commercial success. The same streaming platforms that were making millions from her classic songs offered minimal support for her new material. Radio stations that had once played her music during the height of her popularity suddenly found her sound outdated or not current enough for their playlists. The Grammy nominations that should have accompanied such a strong artistic statement never materialized. For the first time in her career, India received 0 Grammy nominations, a shocking snub that she publicly acknowledged on social media. She admitted to being disappointed but tried to maintain perspective, writing that she was still processing the rejection, while knowing she was on the clear path of my destiny. Television appearances that should have been automatic for a returning Grammy winner became difficult to secure. Talk shows that would book less accomplished artists for weeks of promotion could only offer India brief segments or late-night slots. The message was clear. The industry had decided her moment had passed. The financial reality was harsh. Album sales were a fraction of what they had been during her peak years, and touring revenue couldn't sustain the lifestyle she had built during her successful period. India found herself scaling back her living expenses and questioning whether her decision to speak truth had permanently damaged her earning potential. Ralph Simpson's reaction to his daughter's success had always been one of entitlement and manipulation, but his behavior in his later years reached new levels of audacity. Despite the decades of he had inflicted on India and her mother, Ralph continued to view his famous daughter as a source of financial support, regularly calling to request money while showing no remorse for his actions. The gambling addiction that had plagued Ralph throughout his life intensified as he aged. Joyce revealed in her devastating audio recording that Ralph had stolen money from his son, John, who had worked all summer after college bussing tables to save money for a car. Ralph gambled away his son's entire savings, then had the audacity to ask for more money when his debts mounted. By 2025, Ralph was completely dependent on his children for survival. His son Jean was paying his rent to keep a roof over his head, while Ralph continued to reach out to India requesting financial assistance. The man who had destroyed his children's innocence through sex now expected them to fund his lifestyle and support his gambling addiction. The manipulation tactics Ralph employed were sophisticated and cruel. He would call India during vulnerable moments, using guilt and family obligation to pressure her into sending money. When she refused or tried to set boundaries, he would become angry and threatening, reverting to the same controlling behavior that had terrorized her as a child. Joyce's decision to finally speak publicly about Ralph's crimes was partly motivated by his continued financial exploitation of their children. She was tired of watching him manipulate India and John, using their success to fund his destructive habits while showing no accountability for the trauma he had caused. The revelation of Ralph's ongoing manipulation added another layer to India's tragic story. Even as an adult with her own resources and success, she was still being victimized by the same man who had abused her as a child. The cycle of abuse had never truly ended. It had simply evolved into financial and emotional manipulation that continued to drain her energy and resources decades later. Anyway, that's it for the video, folks. Bye.